Hey, I'm in the playoffs over here.
This high be the type of shit that keep me up at night. Never short of a breath when I spit my rhymes. Clever forms I express every fucking time. Bring me back to the light when I ain't feeling right. This life, something special when I'm on my grind. Never short of the stress when I spit the mind. But of course, never rest until I fucking die. For the more I obsess and rock the fucking.
Hello and welcome back into another edition of Thursday Thriller. This is for week 15 of the NFL regular season for fantasy football. It is the beginning of the playoffs for most of your leagues. We have a grody Thursday night football matchup tonight. Before we get to that, just a quick reminder from now until the end of the fantasy playoffs, including even a beleaguered week 18, which you should not be playing week 18 championships. But hey, the Joker will still be here for you. I will be doing a show. The regular show is week 18. So again, Mondays and Thursdays, we are live 7 p.m. Eastern. We are live 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Early bird catches the worm on Sundays. And of course, every Wednesdays, the wild card Wednesdays are still dropping like usual. You can find them on YouTube and on Spotify. We'll get right into it. We can start with the Thursday night matchup. I remember when fantasy football was supposed to be fun.
You smiling?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Why are you smiling?
Because I love football. Football's fun.
Fun, sir.
Fun, sir.
It's fun.
Yes.
You sure?
I think.
Now you thinking. First you smile, then you think. You think football is still fun?
Yes.
Sir.
Yes. No.
No?
Sir. But it was fun.
Not anymore, though, is it? Is it?
No, not by
No, it's not fun anymore. Not even a little.
So, like so many other teams out there, I find myself in the boat of having advanced to the playoffs. Unfortunately, Justin Herbert was my primary quarterback for a lot of those teams, especially a lot of super flex teams where there's not many other options. I was able to make waiver claims in two separate super flex leagues, including Scott Fishbowl. I made claims on Nick Mullins and Drew Lock. There is a chance that Geno Smith won't start, and Nick Mullins is widely available and has been confirmed the starter at least. So I know for sure I have at least one potential quarterback that I can play. And I've actually kind of always liked Nick Mullins as a game manager type. And, you know, with the weapons that he has available to him, I can see him getting a lot of first downs, maybe a touchdown or two. I'm looking for a baseline of 20 points in Scott Fishbowl, maybe 15 in most standard scoring leagues. With the Thursday night matchup, I mean, we don't have to spend too long on this. There's a lot of injuries. Justin Herbert confirmed out for the season, which is very unfortunate. That's going to affect all the passing options. Keenan Allen is out for this game. I've seen some crazy questions. I was just on a Facebook group for fantasy football. Someone was asking Joshua Palmer or Stephon Diggs. I want nothing to do with this game except for a very basic handful of pieces. So I have a league, my home league. Unfortunately, I did not make the playoffs. However, I'm still very active because you have to not lose your way into the toilet bowl and lose the toilet bowl. If you lose the toilet bowl in this league, you are exiled for 1 year. You are banished from the league. You are not allowed to play for at least 1 year. If you decide to come back after that 1 year and the spot is open, maybe you make it back into the league. But I've designed it that way to really make it crucial for teams in last place to continue playing throughout the entire season. So there are no teams that have any excuses to rest on their laurels. You need to be active through the entire year. So I have, I'm unfortunately in the very first round. My team wasn't so bad that I have a bye week, thank God. because Toilet Bowl is reversed where the two teams in last place are the ones with the bye week, because it essentially shortens your season in that you will only have two matchups to try and win your way out of Toilet Bowl, whereas I will have three chances at least. So I'm playing the Raiders defense. I'm very high on Raiders defense. If you did not manage to get Atlanta or one of these other really good matchups available off waivers and Raiders are still there, I would run screaming and grab the Raiders defense and put them into your lineup. But for offensive pieces, I would play Austin Eckler and nothing else. I don't even care if there is a wide receiver that ends up being viable for fantasy. The ability to predict that, I mean, you could try Joshua Palmer, but I don't see it. It could get split between Palmer and QJ and Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler ultimately, who is really the only piece I'm willing to play. I would play Austin Eckler and no one else for the Chargers. And I would play Chargers defense. I think the Chargers defense is a viable play as well. That's more though for like very deep leagues. If you're in like a 16-team league and somehow, again, Raiders and Atlanta and all these defenses have been snapped up and Chargers are still sitting out there, I would go with the Chargers. And then on the flip side, already talked about Raiders defense. I would start Zamir White. It seems like it's been confirmed that Josh Jacobs is going to miss. And I could see Zamir White coming in and getting a gross 20 for 60, 70 yards and a tutty. And with how beleaguered the running back position is in general, I'm fine if you want to start Zamir White. Make sure you put him in your RB2 spot and not in the flex. If you're just looking for kind of a safe floor. So I have a league in that same league where I'm going to be starting Raiders defense. I'll be starting Zamir White because I'm really banged up at a wide receiver. And so I'll probably be starting Najee Harris and Zamir White in my running back spots. And then I will be probably starting Jahmyr Gibbs in the flex so that I can not have to start an extra wide receiver. So, and then I would play Devontae Adams. I would temper my expectations, but I would still play him. Jacoby Myers, only in the most dire of consequences would I be playing him. But otherwise, I'm not actively trying to start anyone in this game, honestly. For me, if I could, in a shallower league, for example, like 8 to 10 man, it's Devontae, Eckler, and nobody else except the defenses. Moving on to the Saturday games, because we have the triple header for Saturday. And shout out to Underdog. I was able to do the Saturday shootout draft, which was super nice. I was able to get Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And I think that's, obviously Jefferson, impacted by the injury last week, was knocked out of the game, says he's going to play this week. But what really I like is the fact that Jamar Chase has been talking shit. And so I'm kind of hoping that the idea that they're competing for best wide receiver in the NFL is enough to push them both to really excel in this game. So I do have that one underdog bet on them. And obviously Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, they will crack my lineup over most guys, even Justin Jefferson with the injury. It was a completely different injury last week. If it had been the same hamstring or whatever that had kept him out for all those weeks, I would be much more concerned. The fact that he was knocked out with a chest contusion and they were basically playing it safe and took him to the hospital. And also the fact that it's Nick Mullins, who, I like Josh Dobbs' nickname, the Pastronaut. It was a great story, and I didn't think he would crater quite as badly as he has. But Nick Mullins is more of like a game manager type, and we've seen what he can do with the 49ers. And I think that he is the type to just pepper Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson with what I would consider safer PPR targets. So maybe it caps a little bit of the big play upside, but I think ultimately it elevates the floor. for a Justin Jefferson. So I really like, I would still be playing both players basically, and it would take an incredible option for me to bench either of them. Jordan Addison, though, is a fade, I think, because I don't know that Nick Mullins is going to be supporting three options. Ultimately, I think you can play Jefferson, you can play Hawkinson, and if Madison is ultimately out, I would be fine playing Ty Chandler. But if Madison plays again, I'm tired of them splitting carries and work and trying to guess which one of them is viable. And sometimes potentially it could be that neither of them is. So again, if Madison misses, then Ty Chandler will crack my lineup depending on my situation. But primarily for me, I'm going to be playing just Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson. And then in the most dire of situations, like I had mentioned in Superflex, certain Superflex situations where you have no other option, I might be playing Nick Mullins. But honestly, I might end up throwing Drew Lock out there if it's confirmed that Geno Smith doesn't practice all week. The problem with that is it's the Monday night game, and this is a Saturday game. So I might not be brave enough to wait and see if Geno ultimately starts and leaves me with no quarterback. So I might just take whatever I can get from Mullins and adjust my lineup accordingly. On the Bengals side, Browning, even though the Vikings have been a better defense there at home, Browning's been A1. I mean, honestly, I wish I had Jake Browning in certain situations. Again, I wouldn't be starting Jake Browning over just regular quarterbacks that you've been relying on all year, but who have maybe struggled as of late, a la Jared Goff, who we'll talk about later. But I will say that I would start him over Nick Mullins and Drew Lock and Mitchell Trubisky and those types of quarterbacks. And then Jamar Chase, it wasn't great last week, but obviously he had the monster week the week before, and it was with Browning, so he's right back in your lineup. T. Higgins, it was just 2 long passes, but as he works his way back, usually he becomes more viable, and he might be worth a deep shot depending, again, on what are your other options. And then Joe Mixon, it's hasn't been incredibly efficient, but it's been fantasy relevant, so you continue to play Joe Mixon. The second game on the Saturday docket at 4:30, the Steelers and Colts. And apologies, I've been missing the records for these teams. Just doubling back, the Vikings and Bengals both 7-6. The Steelers and Colts also both 7-6. So these are all playoff relevant teams, hilariously enough. The Steelers at Colts. So Deontay Johnson has actually been confirmed, which I feel like is a downgrade to the rest of the pass options. I would be less willing to play George Pickens. You're forced, almost in a sense, to play Pat Freiermuth unless you really have a top level tight end option. So, for example, like Cole Kmet, I think would be kind of like the bar for me. A David Njoku, a Trey McBride. That's got to be kind of the level for me of I would start them over the Muth. But otherwise, I think it's a great matchup. I do think Freiermuth could end up hitting here. So I'd be fine playing Freiermuth because of the positionality. But for the wide receivers, honestly, I would prefer to not play either of them. And I would play both running backs. Again, depending on the situation, I would prefer to play Najee. Even though it's gross and inefficient, it's a great matchup. He got in a full practice, and for the most part, he's still been the lead back and gets more of those straight goal line touches. So I think I would be willing to play Najee and Jaylen Warren, though. I think it's a good matchup for Warren as well if you need that kind of desperate flex option. On the Colts side, it's the usual suspects. I mean, Minshew in a pinch, again, if in the deeper super flex type leagues. but it's pretty much pity city. I'm done trying to play Josh Downs. It's been very disappointing. The targets have gone down is the real disappointment. If he was still getting like 10 targets and it was just inefficient, I could maybe forgive that and try and play the matchup, but the targets just aren't there. So it's pity city. It's Zach Moss, Minshew Mania again in a real pinch in deep superflex, and that is all. The Saturday night game, Broncos 7-6, Lions 9-4. This actually presents as an interesting matchup. I think you play Russell Wilson, you play Cortland Sutton. I'm not very high on Jerry Jeudy. Now he dropped a touchdown, but he has one. I think he actually ended up maybe getting one, and it was his second one on the year. He's got like he's had 500 yards and one touchdown through what is now 13 games. He's not viable really, except in like the really super deep leagues of like, okay, fine. If you were to ask me like Jerry Jeudy or Josh Reynolds, honestly, Josh Reynolds right now has a better shot of getting a touchdown on the other side of the ball. So that's just kind of where I'm at with Jerry Jeudy. So for me, I'm really just looking at Russ, Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, and that's it. And for the Lions, it's the usual suspects. It's Jared Goff, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's David Montgomery, and it's Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, the one thing I will say, hopefully the Lions offense can click and maybe turn this into a Dolphins light game, because the Broncos defense as of late has been significantly better. The run defense has been much better, and the fantasy ranking for the defense is still skewed heavily by that one Dolphins game and earlier in the season. It is not reflective of how they've played as of late. However, it's a home game for the Lions, so hopefully the run game can get going. Jared Goff can get going. Amon-Ra can get going. I forgot Laporta. Obviously, Laporta is in. Also, shout out to fantasy footballers, but also just shout out to what I've been saying all the time. Real life football, more important than fantasy football. Vance Joseph, defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos historically, has been atrocious against tight ends. Like, it's almost comical how badly tight ends score against Vance Joseph defenses. So Laporta is absolutely viable. Even if the Broncos have been playing better as of late, you can play Laporta in this game. He should be fine. Moving right along, the Falcons at Panthers, the first of the Sunday games. Falcons 6-7, Panthers 1-12. Hilariously enough, the Falcons are still competing for the division lead. This is just a gross division. It's a race to the bottom for the NFC South. One of them is going to have to win at some point. Honestly, for fantasy, though, I'm playing Bijan. I'm playing Drake London. I'm even taking the shot on Kyle Pitts, who had one of his best weeks of the season last year. It's been an absolute trope on my show. Who scored more than Kyle Pitts is one of the favorite segments on Monday Mayhem. So it's been a beleaguered season for Kyle Pitts, but given the options that you might have available to you, if he's still kicking around on your roster, I think I would play him in this matchup. And hell, even Desmond Ridder is probably worth a start. Again, assuming that you're like in a league where it's like you've lost Justin Herbert and you're deciding between Desmond Ridder and Nick Mullins, Drew Lock, Mitchell Trubisky, Zach Wilson, that level of quarterback, I would play Desmond Ridder. He's shown not only the ability to just hyper target Drake London and get a couple cheap passing touchdowns with Bijan. I also like the fact that he gets it done on the ground sometimes and gets those rushing touchdowns, which can be extra valuable depending on your league format. So again, not saying that Desmond Ridder is just like a flat start, but he's viable. I really love the defense too in this matchup. The Panthers offense has been extremely good for you to stream against. But yeah, oh man, the Panthers on offense, like I don't even know what to do with them. Chuba Hubbard is now like getting again. Miles Sanders is suddenly like popping up, being somewhat relevant. Had 10 for 70 last week. If he starts eating into Chuba's work, though Chuba still had like 20 for 90. I don't think either of them ended up getting a touchdown. Bryce Young is just he's not working with much in the wide receiver room. It's old man Adam Thielen and Jonathan Mingo and not much else. I really would. It's in the fantasy playoffs. I'm actively not trying to I'm actively trying to get out of starting any Panthers. I mean, if you've made it to the playoffs with a Panthers player on your roster, I mean, that's kind of a miracle. But yeah, I would be looking for any other options at this point. The only one that would be kind of, viable, I guess, as like a floor play is Adam Thielen still. But even that, I've mentioned before, even though he was one of my favorite targets early in the season, in like late in drafts, you were always supposed to have traded him and moved off of him by now. So yeah, if you can just get out. Next up, we've got Bears at Browns. Bears 5-8. Browns are 8-5. I've got some low-key bets on the Browns making a potential Super Bowl run. I know it seems outlandish, but honestly, Joe Flacco it feels like he's got some juice left as the veteran leader. The defense is an absolute knockout. That's the big thing.
Apoplectic. You put out an open contract. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. There's the bell.
So I think that potentially if the defense really gets going and Flacco is able to kind of turn back time, maybe they make a little bit of a playoff run. Maybe they make a push to the AFC Championship. It feels like this year in the AFC, literally anything could happen. And also just feels like definitely an outlier bet. I doubt there's going to be a ton of people trying to make that bet. So who knows? Maybe I get incredibly lucky. It would look very like a crazy prognosticator. But for fantasy for this game, it's kind of scary because it's in Cleveland. I would monitor the weather. I think ultimately, though, I'm going to start Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet in a pinch, but nobody else. I'm not messing around with this three-headed what's that three-headed dog called from Harry Potter? That's this running back room. You don't want to mess with it. So avoid Cerberus. Is that what the name? Anyways, avoid this three-headed backfield. Stick with just Fields, DJ Moore, and Kmet. If they've brought you to this threshold, I would keep riding that. On the Browns side, even though the Bears defense has been better as of late, it's a home matchup. I would start Flacco. And even Amari Cooper, I think his potential is raised by Joe Flacco. If he's healthy and available and playing in this game, I would play Amari Cooper. I would even take the pot shot still on Elijah Moore because the targets have been there. David Njoku obviously has been an extremely viable tight end play. And I like the deep shot on Jerome Ford. I've been very pro Jerome Ford. Now, he almost got a broken wrist, which was terrifying for the prospects for a couple of my teams because I just literally can't handle any more injuries. And I've traded for Jerome Ford in multiple places because of the playoff schedule and because I think the Browns could potentially make a playoff push. And Jerome Ford is absolutely a key aspect of that. He is not just relevant in the run game. He is an excellent pass catching option out of the backfield. And so I love Jerome Ford as long as he's able to stay healthy. And if Kareem Hunt, who is managing his own injuries, I think still dealing with a groin injury, if he's unavailable in any way and it ends up being just Jerome Ford, like that's smash play, especially for the next couple of weeks. They have great matchups. I think the Browns legitimately could make a run and stay ahead of a lot of these other like 7-6 teams. And they'll have a playoff berth. Bucks and Packers are both 6-7. Hilariously, again, both viable playoff teams potentially. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Rashad White, and that's it. And then on the Packers side, Jordan Love, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed. And again, if you're like really hurting at tight end, or you're just looking for a deep shot, or if you're in like a really tight end premium league, I could understand it. But I like Tucker Kraft. I've mentioned it a couple times on the show. When Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft were drafted, they were compared favorably to Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews the year they were drafted by the Ravens. Luke Musgrave compared more closely to Hayden Hurst. Tucker Kraft compared more closely to Mark Andrews. So he is a viable pass catching tight end. And he's had like 6 targets, I think, the last couple games. So I like him. So keeping it rolling. Jets at Dolphins. I mean, Jets. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, end of list. Dolphins, usual suspects here. Keep an eye on the Devon Achane toe injury, but if he plays, I'm still going to put him in my lineup because of the potential. We finally saw last week that, yes, he is human and it cannot work out for fantasy, but you never want to, like, knowing his potential, knowing he can pop off for 200 yards on 10 touches any given time, I wouldn't be wanting to leave that on the bench in my fantasy league, especially in the playoffs. I would have to have a damn good option to play above either Dolphins running back, whether that's Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane. And Mostert I like even more because he's managed to somehow stay healthy this year, which has always been the knock against him. So Mostert and Achane are viable. Tyreek Hill, again, the ankle injury is a concern, but if he plays, you play him. Jalen Waddle, it's been a really bad season for Waddle. And this is a tough matchup with the Jets pass defense, but the Dolphins are at home. Again, what kind of options are we talking about here? If you're asking me Jalen Waddle or Amari Cooper, fine, I would play Amari Cooper. But if you're asking me Jalen Waddle or Elijah Moore in the same game, then I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle. So it just kind of depends on what your auxiliary options are. Don't get cute at this point. Even if they've kind of been struggling and had rough seasons, if you still have hung on to your studs, this is the week to live and die by the best players available to you in your leagues. And then obviously Tua is in your lineup. I think that's pretty obvious. So Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, and potentially Devon Achane if he plays and is healthy. Giants at Saints. Giants hilariously have climbed to 5-8. Saints are 6-7. Tommy DeVito has taken over the fucking world at this point. Like, I'm seeing the Tommy DeVito stuff everywhere. I think it is hilarious. I had made the joke. I started the whole thing of like, hey, I'm on waivers over here. And that was like before he was even relevant, just because I thought the whole thing of the Italian kiss, chef's kiss there was just a hilarious touchdown celebration. I just love the whole gimmick, the shtick, everything about it. His agent, oh my God, his agent looks like he's straight out of a fucking Sopranos casting call. It's like the greatest thing of life. They're in the stands giving each other kisses in between touchdown celebrations, him and the agent and the dad. It's hysterical. So Tommy DeVito, I'm a big fan. Not fucking starting him in my lineups. I don't get it. Even in super flex, like I would play Nick Mullins over Tommy DeVito. I think this, unfortunately, could definitely be a reality call for this Giants offense. The Saints defense is still very good. The Giants have Saquon and basically no one else. Supposedly, Darren Waller could make his way back in this game. I'm not chancing it. I'm playing Saquon because you're forced to, and that is it. On the Saints side of the ball, I'm so sick of watching Derek Carr. I don't understand why they haven't really turned to Jameis Winston. I understand that he makes massive mistakes, but I feel like he gives them more of a chance to win with just given the way the defense plays. But hey, what do I know? I'm just some jamoke up here in Canada. So assuming Derek Carr is in again, Kamara obviously is in your lineup. That's easy peasy. I also would be playing Chris Olave. I'm not trying to look if Taysom Hill is not active. I'm not playing Saints tight end. I'm not fucking around with Jawan Johnson or Jimmy Graham trying to turn back the clock, doing fake dunks. Jimmy Grandpa. That you'd have to be in the deepest of leagues to be throwing Jimmy Graham in your lineup. So for me, again, it's Olave, Kamara, end of list. This is very easy. There's 3 fantasy players I want to play in this game. It's Olave, Kamara, Saquon. That's it. Texans at Titans. Divisional matchup. 7-6 Texans against the 5-8 Titans. However, the Texans potentially could be out without CJ Stroud. Nico Collins says he's going to play. However, he's dealing with a calf injury, so who knows if he's actually going to be available. I honestly, if CJ Stroud's not available, I'm just fading all of the Texans. It's a road matchup. The Titans defense kind of hasn't been the greatest. They were better in the beginning of the year. This feels like the kind of game where they're going to tighten up against a divisional opponent, especially because they faced the Texans twice in the next 3 weeks. If they were to beat the Texans twice in the next 3 weeks, they would essentially have the same record as the Texans, and they could completely flip positions with them. So I expect to see heavy dose of Derrick Henry in this game. I expect the Titans defense to bolt up a little bit here. I have Devin Singletary in a league. Maybe I might get convinced to play him over some very deep options, but probably not, honestly. I think I'm just going to avoid the Texans for this week and kind of see how they manage with all these injuries and on the road. Because, with no bye weeks, there should be other viable matchups available to you. And then on the Titan side, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry, that's it. I'm not trusting Will Levis for my fantasy playoffs unless, again, it's like if you're talking about the level of quarterback of like Drew Lock, Nick Mullins, that Tommy DeVito, that level of quarterback, if you want to throw Will Levis as like a slight tier above those guys, totally fine with that. If you're talking about any kind of single quarterback league, it's not for me. I'm not brave enough. It's DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry, and that's it. The last of the 1:00 games, Chiefs at Patriots. The Kansas City Chiefs, 8-5, at New England Patriots, 3-10. The Patriots have been like the most boring team because they are still decent on defense, but their offense has been borderline unwatchable. However, Bailey Zappi seems to have zapped a little energy into them. However, I'm not fucking around with any of their offensive options. It's Zeke and nobody else for me. And then on the Chiefs side of the ball, it's Rashee Rice, it's Travis Kelce, it's Patrick Mahomes. Assuming Pacheco misses again, I would play McKinnon, not CEH. McKinnon is more favored, even though CEH kind of gets a slight uptick of like volume because he gets kind of some of those grody, just regular carries that they need the running back to take. No, Jerick McKinnon gets all the valuable touches, red zone and pass catching. Jerick McKinnon every time, that's it. So, again, just a recap, because I feel like I just ran through that in like 10 seconds. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, still very much in my lineups. I like Rashee Rice, and I would play Jerick McKinnon. And then on the Patriots side, I would play Zeke. That's it. 49ers at Cardinals in the first of the 4 o'clock games. 10-3 49ers, 3-10 Cardinals. So flipped records here. Divisional matchup. I think the 49ers are going to kick the shit out of the Cardinals. Cardinals defense has been kind of surprisingly decent. The team's been surprisingly competitive. However, Hollywood Brown might not be available for this game. If you have Kyler Murray, I would be really struggling to start Kyler Murray. I would be looking at the replacement level options above a Kyler Murray, for example, like a Will Levis who is at home, and I think DeAndre Hopkins has a good revenge game in him potentially. And so maybe Will Levis kind of has, his first 300-yard game or whatever and like 2 touchdowns kind of. I could see something like that happening. There's narratives that you can talk me into above Kyler Murray coming in without his number 1 wide receiver against the 49ers and showing up. But hey, maybe he does it. If you're really got the steel cojones to play a Kyler Murray, then hey, all the fucking power to you. But I mean, I honestly wouldn't even want to play James Conner in this matchup if I can help it. If I had like a really viable option, so for example, I picked up Zamir White because he's potentially starting. I would play James Conner over a Zamir White, but I would play either Lions running back David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs. I would play both of them over James Conner. I would play Kyren Williams over him. I would play James Cook over him. Lots of viable options above him. So for the Cardinals, honestly, fade them all. And then for the 49ers, you start who you normally start. CMC, Brock Purdy-licious, George Kittle, and then Debo and Ayuk. Commanders at Rams. This is potentially one of the higher scoring matchups that could be on the docket. 4-9 Commanders at the 6-7 Rams. I am not enthused about playing a Commanders wide receiver because it feels like Sam Howell always ends up as like the sum of the parts, and those parts individually don't always show out. However, again, in a pinch, depending on your lineup situations, I think the one that I would play is Curtis Samuel as like a wide receiver 3 deep flex option. Just the way they use him in the offense, he kind of just tends to be more viable, and he's usually he's like the reason that Jahan Dotson hasn't hit as like a fantasy sleeper. And then, I mean, you can play Terry McLaurin, but it's been like the ceiling feels like 5 for 75. So it's been really gross. He was upset though and made like comments about being a cardio king. Maybe there is potentially an overcorrection in this game specifically. Maybe this ends up being a monster Terry McLaurin game. He's good enough that I would be starting him over auxiliary options again. So if you're talking to me about Brandon Cooks, Odell Beckham, Zay Jones, JSN, Jameson Williams, I find he kind of slots in the middle of that. There might be 1 or 2 of those that I said where you could convince me maybe, okay, fine, maybe you should start him over Scary Terry, but those kind of back end options, I feel like Scary Terry is still more viable, especially like, a JMO and JSN, these kind of untapped potential guys. I feel like you still play Terry McLaurin for the floor. On the Rams side of the ball, though, it's pretty easy for me. I mean, it's Kyren Williams' show. Matt Stafford's in the lineup. And then as long as they're healthy, you play Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And yeah, they might not hit every single game the way Cooper Kupp did in his magical season, but they're still so talented that you play them in a great matchup like this over probably 90% of the wide receivers you would have available to you. Oh, and we're closing in here. We got 3 matchups left. Cowboys at Bills. Cowboys are 10-3. Bills are 7-6. This one, I actually love this matchup. People have been nervous about starting Stephon Diggs. Now, I will say there is potential for a Stephon Gilmore revenge game because he's playing DB for the Cowboys and has been having a very underrated season. However, I feel like Diggs potentially matches up with Deron Bland. We'll see if it ends up being Gilmore or Bland on Diggs for the majority of the game. However, this definitely feels like a game where, the Cowboys defense is extremely good and they are extremely good at creating turnovers. However, when they don't create those turnovers, a lot of times because they're taking the chances of trying to create those turnovers, potentially it does allow for big plays from their opponents. And so I think that Stephon Diggs could potentially have a really good game here. I cannot do the Gabe Davis thing anymore. I've been back and forth with Gabe Davis. It seems like every time I try to play this man, I get boned.
What happens in my bedroom, detective, is none of your business. Bone! Don't ever speak to me like that again.
Rest in peace on Andre Brower. Detective Holt, you're cherished in our memories. But yeah, I can't do the Gabe Davis thing anymore. So unless you are in like a super desperate situation. Now, the one thing I will say is because this is a kind of later Sunday matchup, if you have him on the bench and you have a safe option. So here's a perfect example. If I have Adam, that works. Adam Thielen or Gabe Davis. So Adam Thielen plays early Sunday. Gabe Davis plays late Sunday. If I have a couple guys going between Thursday and Saturday, if all of my guys going Thursday, Saturday shit the bed, then I'm going to put Gabe Davis in my lineup because we've seen it. It's 0 or 20 and it's like he's literally gone back and forth week to week. Technically speaking, this should be a 20 weeks. So you can, if you really want to live dangerously, like I'm talking like playing some Russian roulette, go ahead, but it's not for me. I'm limiting myself basically to Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and James Cook. And then on the other side of the ball, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard. Obviously, I would even play Brandon Cooks in this matchup. Not so much deep diving on like the Jake Fergusons of the world. The only thing to really monitor here, I like Jake Ferguson. I was saying Michael Gallup is the one that I'm not deep diving on. I do like Jake Ferguson, though, as a tight end play. The reason I kind of mixed the names up is because I was thinking of the Buffalo tight ends on the flip side. Just monitor Dalton Kincaid potentially with an injury. If he's out, Dawson Knox has made his way back from IR and could end up being like a really deep streamer. Again, depending on your league options and situations. Probably better tight end options available to you, but just throwing it out there. The last of the Sunday matchups, the Sunday night football matchup, a little bit of a doozy here. Ravens at Jaguars. Maybe could potentially turn into a good game. I like Lamar Jackson. He had a really good fantasy week last week. Hopefully he doesn't disappoint this week. I could see that happening on the road, but I think that the way that they've been utilizing the players since they made the switch from Gus Bus to Keaton Mitchell has been more viable for Lamar, and it feels like maybe that's why they've done it and stuck with it. So unfortunately, Gus Bus is not viable except as like a super deep flyer. For example, I was potentially thinking about flexing Gus Bus and just hoping he busts his way into the end zone. But I prefer Zamir White. I feel like he's going to get the lead and more carries, and so I'm going to roll with that. So that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm at with Gus Bus. However, I do think that Zay Flowers is a viable play. I think Isaiah Likely is viable. And Odell Beckham. As long as Odell Beckham is healthy, he is definitely a viable fantasy play for you. Again, on the level of a Brandon Cooks. On the Jaguar side of the ball, Calvin Ridley continues to be a complete enigma. It's a tough matchup. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. If you have made it this far somehow with Calvin Ridley still on your team, you play him because of the boom or bust potential. And you can't really predict necessarily like, oh, well, this is the game he's just going to explode and have a monster game. So I personally would just be still playing him, but I mean, you might not. Again, I don't know what else you do, especially it's like Christian Kirk's on IR. Zay Jones had a crazy amount of targets, so did Evan Ingram. I could see it flipping this game. Who knows? I feel like the one real trustworthy play that I like is I like Evan Ingram here. I like Travis Etienne. I mean, you play Trevor Lawrence above, again, the backup auxiliary options, but you temper your expectations. And if you have a better option, if it's a single quarterback league and you have a decent other option, then I would pivot to that. Maybe this turns up in. I will say sometimes the Ravens do find themselves, even though they have a good defense, they do kind of find themselves in weird shootouts sometimes. But I don't know. This was a tough one. I feel like you would have to have really good options still, though, to pivot away from the Jaguars. Finally, the Monday night matchup, which is a pivotal matchup in terms of fantasy football. There is a lot of fantasy that is going to come down to this Monday night matchup. The Eagles 10-3 at the Seahawks 6-7. This is going to be a doozy, especially right now. Geno Smith is one to monitor if he's going to be available. It's going to affect the wide receiver play. The matchup is really, really good. Tyler Lockett is for sure going to crack my lineups over most wide receivers. DK Metcalf is going to be in my lineup. Maybe he blows up. Maybe he blows up. It's either he's going to blow up for fantasy or blow up his temper, it feels like. So you play him. But the one I'm worried about is, do you play Drew Lock in a pivotal matchup like this if Geno Smith is not available as a super flex option, assuming, again, that you are like me and you have lost Justin Herbert? If I knew right now, if you told me right now Geno Smith was for sure going to be out, I would have him ranked over I think I would play him over Nick Mullins. I think I would play him over Mitchell Trubisky. That would be kind of the level for me. But with not knowing if Geno is going to be available or not, I'm not trying to wait around for it. And so I'm probably going to end up taking a safer option. But I think DK and Tyler Lockett crack your lineup. It was a disappointing week for Ken Walker, but assuming he's had full practices this week, I would still play him, even though it's a really tough Eagles front. The Seahawks are at home, and I can see them trying to lean on the running backs a little bit more. I'm not really trying to flex Charbonnet, Zach Charbonnet, the backup. If they're splitting carries, I'm going to go with just the primary and really hope. But even then, it's like if you had a really viable option, for example, like a James Cook, or even, unfortunately, my slam dunk of the year, Najee Harris.
Do you want to see me dunk?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. Are you guys ready? I'm okay. No, don't worry.
Does that always happen?
I would play Najee over Ken Walker. That's kind of the level that I'm at. And then on the Eagles side, I mean, it's been really disappointing for DeAndre Swift as of late. I think he's been dealing with injuries, which is like the history of his entire career. But assuming he's available to play, you play him. And then obviously you start A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Hurts. And even Dallas Goedert, who's, super mid. Dallas Goedert's the one for me of like, okay, well, it depends what the level is. If I lost Goddard and I've had a decent option replacing him this entire time, for example, a Trey McBride, I would still play Trey McBride in a tough matchup against the Niners over a Dallas Goedert. So that would kind of be the level that I'm at. And that is it for the rundown of the matchups. We still have a couple minutes left. I'm just going to go check here. It doesn't seem like anyone jumped into the comments. So I see some questions, though, in the group chat. Half point PPR, pick one. Chris Olave, Devonta Smith, or Devontae Adams. I'm going with Chris Olave in the matchup against the New York Giants. Yeah. I think you go with Olave. He's the primary wide receiver option. Taysom Hill's banged up too, so it feels like more of it should go through. It should be primarily just Olave and Kamara, and the matchup's great. So I think you do go with Olave. DK Metcalf or Devontae Adams. I would go with DK Metcalf. Raiders defense a good start tonight. Absolutely they are. They are definitely a good start tonight. I'm starting them myself in my home league, like I mentioned, where the loser of the toilet bowl is exiled. You are banished for 1 year from the league. Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson. Oh man. I have not been a huge proponent of Garrett Wilson because of the shenanigans they were having with the quarterbacks when they went away from Zach Wilson, and it was Tim Boyle, Boyle rules, and fucking Trevor Siemian that they were planning to trot out. I think I would go with Garrett Wilson there. Half point, start one. Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel, Evan Ingram. That's Evan Ingram. Absolutely. Anyone starting Zamir White tonight? Yes, I am. I am starting Zamir White. And the Raiders defense, like I mentioned, because again, it's just to kind of pull it up, and I'll just go through my home league real quick with you guys, and then we'll get on out of here. Get ready for the games. Again, this is a home league, so the buy-in is $150. The grand prize is $1,000. I did not make the playoffs, unfortunately. However, the punishment for this league is exile. If you lose in the toilet bowl, you are banished for 1 year. And the way that it works in toilet bowl, if you are not familiar, the teams that are in last place are the ones with the bye. It's kind of the reverse of your normal playoff standings. So being that I was not the worst of the worst, I will have 3 chances to win my way out of toilet bowl and not be exiled from my own league, which I would then have to commission but not play in next year, which would be extremely embarrassing for myself. So I'm very much trying to avoid that. I am the 8th seed facing the 9th seed, and I'm just dealing with a lot of injuries. I've got DJ Moore, who is questionable. He upgraded to limited status, but it's also a road matchup at Cleveland. I've got, some kind of auxiliary options at the bottom of like a Gus Edwards or a Jonathan Mingo or an Elijah Moore. And this is all because I have had Nick Chubb at the very beginning of the season go on IR very recently. Last week, it cost me not this past week, the week before, week 12, basically. When Christian Kirk got injured, it ultimately knocked me out of the playoffs because I lost by 6 points. And even worse, everything or sorry, so that was week 13, and then week 14 this past week. Everything that needed to happen for me to make the playoffs, if I had won that matchup, happened. So it's like, fuck, I would have made the playoffs if Christian Kirk just doesn't get injured in that game. Very unfortunate, but because of that, obviously I don't have like as much depth, and I've lost pieces along the way. So I will be probably rolling out Najee Harris and Zamir White as my RB1, RB2. For now, as wide receivers, I have Deontay Johnson, who got in a full practice, said he's going to be available, says he's good to go for week 15. So, I mean, for my case, that's good because I needed him. So him, DJ Moore, like I mentioned, upgraded to limited, so he's probably going to play. And then I have Mike Evans as well, who's been a godsend for me, and the reason my team hasn't been completely bunk. And then I'm going to have Jahmyr Gibbs in the flex is what I'm going to be doing. So I feel like that's a good, viable starting lineup. Hopefully, I'm hoping for, honestly, just a baseline of like 10 points from Zamir White. I'm hoping for a really nice game from the defense. And that's kind of where I'm at. So, yes, to answer the question, I am starting Zamir White and the defense. And I guess I'll take, fuck it, 2 more questions here, and then we'll cut on out. Pick 2, Chris Olave, Cortland Sutton, Chuba Hubbard. I'm going to go with the wide receivers, Olave and Sutton. And finally, Jerick McKinnon or Zeke in the same matchup. I'm going to go with Zeke just because he's going to get all of the work. He's literally like their whole offense right now on the Patriots side, whereas McKinnon, even though he's a viable play, he's obviously going to be splitting the work, whether it's CEH or Pacheco or, whoever. So, yeah. Oh, we had one come in at the very last second. Okay, Zamir White or Chuba Hubbard. Yeah, I'm still, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going with Zamir White tonight. Maybe part of it, too, is I will say there's a part of me that because of all the injuries, and maybe it's because it's my first year doing content, I do feel a little bit more beleaguered, and I'm kind of just like, trying to get to the end of the fantasy season. It feels like maybe my call sign should be
Roger that, wet blanket.
No, from now on, call me Velvet Thunder.
Okay. And that is it for me. If you guys end up watching this later, shout out to you guys, the listener. Thank you so much for supporting the show. As always, we're going to be running these lives Monday and Thursday. They help my schedule, and they reduce the amount of editing I have to do in post, so that's always great. So, again, Monday, Mayhem, Thursday, Thriller, live, 7 p.m. Eastern, weekly until the end of the fantasy season, including Week 18. Also, Wildcard Wednesdays, dropping every Wednesday still. You can find those on YouTube and on Spotify. And finally, the Sunday live stream. That's where you will catch me next, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will see you guys there, and I will catch you all on the flip side. Holy shit, my mouse is not working. All right, there we go. Yes, we're out. Catch you on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes